our next session will dive into how leaders and HR teams play a pivotal role in shaping a positive mental health culture in the workplace. And we're very honored to have with us a distinguished leader in the field of HR and employee well-being, N Prasad, who is a seasoned HR expert. He's also the president of the Singapore Human Resources Institute, SHRI, and his work has been at the forefront of shaping how organizations address and prioritize mental health. So we will be looking forward to his keynote, and we do want to save some time for questions. So if you could scan the QR code, which we will flesh out in a bit, throughout the talk, you can actually scan the QR code, leave your questions, and we'll get to the questions later. All right, with that, let's welcome Prasad to the stage. Thank you, Prasad, for joining us.
Morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? We had some amazing insights to the great work Intellect is doing. I did not hear a loud enough applause for Theodoric and the team. Can we please give them a big round of applause? All right. You saw my introduction in the earlier slide, but I wanted to tell you that it's less so because I'm the president of SHRI, the current president of SHRI, even less so that I was still about 10 days ago the CHRO for GovTech. It's more because I was the mental well-being champion at GovTech, a role that I took very seriously, and a fact that I have I've been there, done that, if you will. I mean, gone through a journey of which I will share, because of which I agreed to be here as a keynote speaker when Frank approached me first. So it's less to do with the titles, more to do with the experience and the impact that I have personally faced, and therefore, what has made me being the champion of this space. First of all, let me start off by saying it's okay to be not okay. Okay, it's perfectly all right. And then we hear this a lot when we are dealing with the mental well-being space, mental health space, and I want to reiterate that message. Let me go back to 2016. I was with Google at that point in time, and I had just moved from Singapore to our headquarters in Mountain View. I was to set up a global, first in the history of Google kind of an organization in the HR space. So it was a global role. I was the founding director of the space. I go there, the family hadn't moved yet, and inexplicably, there were days on no end where I would cry myself to sleep every single night. And I didn't know what was happening. Okay? I just did not have any idea. Without my knowledge, I had started retracting from interacting with people. My sister and her family were there. Some of my best friends were there. And I was finding every reason not to meet anybody. I was going through my coaching journey at that point in time with Newfield, and I took that as a good excuse to stop meeting people. And I had no idea what was happening. Right? And this continued. And there was a hard decision that I took to move back to Singapore because we thought this would continue to be home. And more importantly, I did not find US to be home for me. So we came back and everything continued. I tried taking a break. Nothing worked, and I still didn't know what was happening with me, right? All the bells and whistles of the role. It's a global role. I'm with a great organization, great team. I'm supposed to be happy and I'm supposed to be okay. Sometime early 2017, I was having a chat with my sister on the phone, and I broke down again without my knowledge. And then she pointed out saying, hey, would you mind if I ask you something? What's happening with you? And then have you seen a doctor? Have you seen a psychiatrist? And I asked her, so psychiatrist for what? And she told me that she had gone through a bout of clinical depression and she got help, and that I should go and talk to one myself because she could recognize something was off, right? And I did that. I went to the psychiatrist, and lo and behold, I was diagnosed with clinical depression at that point in time. But I started fighting treatment. Right? I was happy to go to therapy, but hey, medicines, no way. I'm going to fight it out. I'm still getting up in the morning, going for my runs. I'm still focusing on myself. I'm doing great at work. My behaviors had started changing, not every day, but in moments. And there was a particular point in May 2017, I still remember this, a very dear colleague of mine who had worked with me at that point for close to 10 years. And I had a conversation with him, and it was such an unpleasant conversation that I had with him that I couldn't recognize myself in that conversation. And this is not me. This is not who I want to be, most importantly. I went back to the doctor and said, I'm ready for medication at that point in time. So May 2017 to Jan 2018, I was on treatment. And Jan 2018 onwards, I've not been in any kind of medication or therapy. It's worked, but I built a strong awareness to what this could be. And therefore, again, using my coaching knowledge as well, I'm able to at least appreciate when I see people going down that path. We always say in coaching, you can coach, you can mentor, you can advise, but do not offer therapy if you're not trained to be one, right? And therefore, I can recognize people, even in my teams, and I've recognized people when they're going down that path and nudge them to support. So why am I sharing this? It takes a village to help somebody who is going through this journey. It took my sister. And what I had also done was, as soon as I got into the treatment, I had enlisted 3 of my closest colleagues at work to keep a tab of me, help me understand and help me see the mirror if I was not behaving properly, if I was off. So I wanted the reinforcements, I wanted the support, and of course family was of great help as well. So it definitely takes a village. And the most supporting person during this entire journey, because I would spend 12, 13, 14 hours at work, was my manager, who was remote at that point in time. He was in the US, I was in Singapore, and I had shared this with him, and he was the most supportive. He did all the right things, just checking in on me, not forcing their opinions, not forcing solutions, advice, etc., but just checking in on me and making me sure that he was there, he had my back. So it's very, which is why it brings me back to the point that we were talking about, which is the role of the leaders. Okay, so the role of the leaders, and that's the topic of my session today. Question: how many of you here have experienced burnout? Let me characterize it further. How many of you have experienced burnout or thought you had experienced burnout during COVID and after? That's about 5% of the room. The other 95%, you better show your Superman cape to all of us right away. Or, as I jokingly say, you're lying. And I say it in a light way because it's not about lying blatantly. It was probably about it was probably that you did not realize that you were going through some of those challenges. But if there was anyone here in the room, especially because of what we went through COVID and after, who is putting their money on the table and telling me that they did not experience burnout or some form of burnout, I would put every dollar in my wallet on the table to disagree with that and challenge you on that. Right? And why is this important? And we will go through some of the details now. And then leading up to why the role of leadership is important in building a culture of well-being, a culture of mental well-being and mental health in organizations. Mental health is also health, and that's another very important caption that I heard in the past few years, and it can't agree more with that. So it is important. We go to the doctor when we have a fall, when there's a wound, when there's a headache, what have you, but then we don't go to the doctor saying that's pretty much what happened with me, right? I thought I was okay, and I resisted. Even when I went to the doctor, I resisted medication. It is important to acknowledge and appreciate that mental health is also health. Next slide, please. Now, why is that we require constant wake-up calls in this? And as Theo mentioned earlier, it is a work in progress. It's a longitudinal journey. We're not at an optimal stage yet. I don't believe we will be anytime soon. So it is important that we give ourselves wake-up calls every now and then, just as a reminder that this space requires our utmost attention on a continual basis. So some facts here. 1 in 5 employees globally experience daily loneliness. And this is probably the starting point of, everything to follow, right? And 1 in 5, we're talking about 20%. There is younger employees, and Theo's talked about it as well. 1 in 3 that we were talking, or 3 in 10 that we were talking about. Younger employees were more affected than the older employees, and in the delta there was 5%. So there were 5% more younger employees who were impacted by mental health than the older employees. There is a very positive correlation between engaged employees and their overall life experiences. And that, again, goes back to the role that a manager or a leader has to play in an organization. And 7 in 10 suffer from mental health issues, and there's a 1 trillion revenue loss in productivity, healthcare, etc., that an organization has to face and cough up. So that's a 1 trillion revenue loss that we're talking about globally, and that's a big number. Okay? Even if you're just looking at it from a perspective of bottom line, that's a wake-up call strong enough. Next slide, please. Interestingly, it's just not some of this data. The macroeconomic aspects also play a part, and this was very surprising when I saw this report. Next slide. First, countries where people think it's a good time to find a job have lower active disengagement. So the active disengagement at workplace is on an average 15% globally. But in the countries where there is a positive outlook about employment, the unemployment rate is low, there's actually a lower active disengagement in the job. So it's completely outside of the purview of the organization that we're with, but there is an impact. Second one, labor protections are associated with employees evaluating their present overall life better. And in talking about the context of Singapore, the tripartite alliance that comes in plays such a critical role here, right? And that was the first thing that struck me when I looked at this insight. Independent of labor laws, employee engagement is associated with the hope for the future. So again, a positive outlook in the economy, in jobs, everything, again, has an impact of how employees are engaged or otherwise. And then the last one is engaged employees in countries with substantial labor right laws have the strongest emotional health. Right? So again, I would like to circle back to the ecosystem. So it's just not about individuals, healthcare providers, managers, leaders. It's also about the governments, which can have a huge role to play just by the way the policies are drafted and are implemented. Next slide, please. Role of managers. Managers have more negative experiences than non-managers. Again, especially the sandwich generation, as we call. So there are the employees, the individual contributors, they're the leaders, but people who are in the middle managers, experience more challenges in terms of their mental well-being. And when managers are engaged, employees are likely to be more engaged. We talk about the shadow of the leader. I have that in one of my next slides as well. So engaged managers leads to better engaged employees in the organization too. It's 75% of the managers are engaged in typical best practice organizations, progressive organizations, let's put it that way. And about 70% of the managers are known to be engaged. Then there's a 25-30% of the people that we need to take care of who could trigger challenges, not just for themselves, but also for their teams and for the organization. Next slide, please. Coming back to the core of the theme for the talk today, leaders as change agents, leaders as catalysts for change, as catalysts for implementing and strengthening the culture of mental well-being and mental health. The tone from the top is absolutely critical. Next slide. There are 3 roles that a leader can play, and I'm going to have a slide each on each one of them. The first one for me, which is very critical, and again, drawing from my own experiences, is a role of a role model that a leader plays. So as a role model, it's absolutely important that we wear our own oxygen masks first before we start helping others. Okay? It is important that we focus on our holistic and mental well-being as well before we jump into helping others. And it's classic, airplane situation. help yourselves before you help others, right? Uh, the shadow of the leader is a real deal. I'll share a very quick experience that I had about 3 weeks or 4 weeks ago. I was walking from a meeting which wasn't a very pleasant meeting. The meeting kind of turned out to be a bit toxic. I did not like it, and I think it started showing on my face. I was coming out, and there was a colleague of mine who looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Sure, why are you asking me that?" She said, "There is something missing in your aura today." And these are the exact words that she said. She said, "Something missing in your aura today." I smiled at myself and said, "I'll be okay. I just need a coffee." And in my mind, I was thinking, what happened in the meeting is showing on me and my face and my body language and what have you, and people pick it up. As leaders, there are more eyes and ears on us than we can imagine. So the shadow of the leader is a real deal, which is why it's important that we take care of ourselves before we start helping others. Setting boundaries, prioritizing, and delegating could be important, is an important way of maintaining our well-being as leaders. Then the one important thing is we shouldn't be delegating leadership. And I see some of that happening as well, and that's not good leadership practice. Don't delegate leadership, but definitely prioritize and delegate work and delegate chunks of work. Focusing on 3 C's, very critical. The first one is to commit to doing something about it. Second one is communicate about it and communicate often. And third one is constant check-ins and follow-ups. And again, this links back to the point that I made about not delegating leadership. The commitment, communication, and check-ins cannot be delegated. It has to be owned by the leaders or the collective leadership team of the organization. Fourth one, there is, again, research which shows that personal and professional growth and continuous development aids in good mental well-being, and therefore, how do we demonstrate intellectual curiosity and intellectual humility to continuously learn and continuously grow ourselves as well as we help people do that? Again, role modeling that is going to be very important. So as Carl Jung said, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. Next slide, please. The second role that the leader plays in this journey is that of a strategist or a decision maker or an organization leader. So what are the 4 things that we could do as leaders wearing this hat? The first one is, it is imperative that we make it organization's priority. 2 is, we talked about the 3 C's earlier. I'll talk about the 3 P's here. Policies, programs, and people who are responsible for implementing them. I think all 3 play a huge role, and there has to be focus on all 3. It is a longitudinal journey, so staying on course is absolutely important. Patience, if I could add a 4th P to it, is important. It's not something that we can see overnight success with or overnight changes with. It is a longitudinal journey. Any change, any transformation is one, and it's important to remember that. And the 4th one is we need to invest for the future, and in just like what you were sharing, both tangible and intangible benefits that we accrue are absolutely worth it. Again, there are a lot of challenges that we see is there is commitment, but there's no investment. One without the other won't necessarily help. So reminds me of my favorite quote from Winston Churchill: "Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts." And that kind of fits in aptly for the space as well. Next slide, please. Third hat, custodian of culture. Again, culture is not just the leader's responsibility or the leadership team's responsibility. Everyone is, but the leader is definitely the custodian. Right? So 4 things that the leaders should do and must do as custodians of culture, wearing this hat. One is making psychological safety table stakes in the organization. Focus a lot. Again, that's not something that we can build overnight. There has to be a lot of investment, a lot of effort going into making it a psychologically safe space. So imagine, in my experience, if I had not felt safe to share with my manager, if I had not felt safe to share with my team and ask them to hold me accountable for how I was showing up in those meetings during my journey. If that wasn't there, if I had that in the back of the mind that, okay, I will be labeled a madman, or I would be labeled unproductive, they would already make a decision that I'm not going to be effective as a leader because I'm going through a journey of my own. If I had all those thoughts buzzing in my head, I would never be focusing on the journey. I would be doing disservice to myself, to organization, to the role, and to people around me. And none of those thoughts ever occurred to me once, and that is because psychological safety was number one priority for us at Google at that point in time, right? And it continues to be. So it is important that we build psychological safety and make it table stakes. Second one, build ownership from for the space grounds up. I mean, I can share an example of what we did in GovTech, what we continue to do in GovTech. There is a mental well-being chapter, and it's actually led by our GovTechies, and then there is a leader as a sponsor. I mean, I was playing that part, but it's actually driven by the GovTechies themselves. There are several communities of practices. There are several speakers. They have a lot of programs. Of course, the HR team is responsible for the policies, but the programs, awareness, evangelizing, providing that safer space in addition to what they already have with their managers is all taken care of by this grounds up group. So that can be very powerful. Building communities can be very powerful. And it's a team sport. Like I mentioned, everyone can be a well-being leader. It doesn't have to be the leader of the organization, definitely not just the CHRO or the head of total rewards. Everyone can be one, and how can we make that happen? Invest in manager skilling. I think I cannot tire of saying this. It is absolutely important, the first line of support that they get. I mean, again, as I was sharing, I now have enough awareness, and in wearing my various hats, I can look at somebody and I know they're not okay, and I can encourage them. And that's all the managers need to do. Provide that psychologically safe space and be able to offer them support the way the employees would want. So training managers is absolutely important. And they have to own the space as much as the leaders of the organizations do. Okay? And fourth one is invest in developing skill sets, tool sets, and mindsets. I think skill sets is possibly easier. Tool sets, set of programs and apps and everything that we can develop, but it's the mindset that's the hardest journey that we need to cover. The one big thing for me is to normalize open conversations about holistic well-being, including mental well-being. I'm really happy to see the tremendous progress we've made in Singapore on the whole in the last 5 years. It wasn't the case, and we all know that, right? It's brilliant to see that as mainstream conversation. And it shouldn't just be a mainstream conversation, it should be a very normalized conversation. It's a necessary conversation that we should have. And therefore, each one of us can play a part, just not within the organizations, but within our circles of influence, within the community. How can we do that? And mental well-being is not a destination, it's a journey. Next slide, please. It won't be a walk in the park. I mean, there are several reasons that all of us are aware of, next slide, because of which there will be challenges. Aligning strategies with business goals, right? And is there enough data to prove this is going to be directly correlated, and is the investment worth it, etc. Third one, there will be leadership buy-in. Yes, I'm absolutely supportive of the space, but I don't have the dollars to support. What do we do? Okay? Relevance of programs and engagement thereof. It's not just a tick in the box, and that's another risk that we run. Oh, we need to have mental wellness programs. We need to have a talk every week or every second week. Is there engagement? Are people getting something out of it? Is there relevant programs that we need? Right? Mental health as a stigma, that still continues. It might not be in our generations, but when I have to go back to my story. When I first shared with my parents about my journey, and again, they're in a different generation, they were in denial. I mean, I'm sitting in front of them in Bangalore. I still remember this day vividly. I was telling them about what I was going through and the journey. They both looked in different directions. They weren't even looking at me, and they were in denial. They changed the topic. They moved to talking about somebody's wedding in the family in 30 seconds time. That's a challenge that we still face today. And how do we work on that? And that goes back to the awareness and normalizing conversations we were talking about. Sensitivity, confidentiality, and privacy. Utmost importance when dealing with the space. And, is it about proactive prevention versus ticking off boxes that we have? So there's a lot going on here. While we know there is a lot that we can do, there are also going to be challenges along the way. And therefore, it adds to the fact that it's a longitudinal journey. It needs that investment of time, energy, continuous commitment, effort, and dollars at the end of it. Yeah, next slide. Next slide. There's some unique practices that we see, but if you really look at it, be it holistic well-being is the way to go. So there's physical, emotional, mental, physical well-being, everything one-to-one. And there's, again, enough study to connect one with the other. So lack of physical well-being can lead to mental well-being issues as well. So it's the holistic well-being approach that we need to take as organizations, as leaders. The 3 A's. So we did the 3 C's, the 3 P's, and the 3 A's now. Awareness, access, and adoption. Continuously work on awareness, building awareness, individual levels, teams, managers, etc. Access to help, access to programs. And then how do we track adoption, make sure that it's working, right? Destigmatizing the space and having open conversations, building champion network, mental health sick days, etc. Some of the practices that we're seeing. This is something that we followed in GovTech when we started the hybrid work. 3 first principles for us. I have 1 last minute to close. It was trust, flexibility, and choice. Right? So that I put this as a best practice because I genuinely believe that it's a good practice, if not the best practice, which worked very well for us. Intentional investment, leadership matters, focus on the role of managers. We've spoken about that. Again, like I said, I can't tire off speaking about the importance of the role of a manager here. And responsible use of technology for scalability. There's enough talk about AI and everything these days. Without a fad, if you're not even using technology, then suddenly jumping into something because everybody is talking about it will not work. So what works in the context of the organization? So I'll say responsible use of technology for scaling the programs that we deliver. So best practice always works in the context of the culture of the organization. So lifting and shifting will not work, and we shouldn't try and do that as well. But if you really look at some of this, are they groundbreaking? Are they things that we haven't heard of, done? Maybe not. And I focused on some of this because it is absolutely important in a journey like this to focus on what is essential, what's basic, get our basics in place, and then build on that. And which is why some of these really appeal to me, and I wanted to share it with all of you. When is the last time you did something for the first time? I'll leave this question with all of you. And I would encourage all of you to mull over this question and think about something that you would do for the first time in the context of our discussion today. As leaders in the organization, how would you go back and do something for the first time to support that journey in the organization, even support journey of that one person who needs that help? So I'll leave this with you as a question. Next slide. Again, to end with it, it is okay not to be okay. And we have an ecosystem of this nature to journey with. And best wishes, and thank you again for having me today.
Thank you. Thank you, Prasad. Can I keep you on stage? Because I think we have quite a few questions. I personally took away a lot from this sharing, and I could relate to a lot of your experiences that you've shared. So thank you very much again. We have quite a few questions. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through all. Key workplace practices to put in place to improve employment of persons with mental health. Would you have any insights to this?
So, it's going to be, again, I'll go back to a few points that I shared earlier. It's important that they feel safe in the place. So that's probably going to be number one, which means that they need to get support from their managers. And two, I think there is a level of confidentiality, privacy that we will have to maintain. Otherwise, we'll never be able to build the psychological safety. So treat it as normal. And then again, acknowledge that they could have good, bad, ugly moments, but it's not that they will be in that space forever. You know, it could happen in a minute. It could happen in a 15-minute cycle. But that's a contract, if I would say, between a manager and the person and the individual. So you give them the freedom, the flexibility to, let's say, step away from where they are. It could be a meeting, it could be work, step away till they feel comfortable and they're back. And trust me, it wouldn't last for days. It lasts for a few hours or maybe a day at most. So how do we offer flexibility? How do we trust them? Most importantly, don't brandish them, don't label them as anything, anybody. Right? So I would go back to those first principles. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I think we had one more question. I can't find it, but I thought it was very relevant, and there were some upvotes, which is, should this be built into leaders' KPI, psychological safety or building psychological safety? Yeah, so this is the one. Should it be a KPI of leaders?
Absolutely. I mean, I will be biased here because of my role. I am an HR and OD professional, and I'm a coach. So as a CHRO, building a great place to work should be everybody. It's not, again, just a CHRO's responsibility. It's the leadership's responsibility, and it should be on the organization KPIs. We had it at GovTech. We had it at Google. So most of the progressive organizations would have it. Again, as part of strengthening and nurturing the culture, it could be a culture of well-being, culture of learning, culture of coaching, what have you, the manager excellence, etc. If we can build a KPI around it. I mean, it doesn't have to be an individual mental well-being related KPI, but mental well-being should be a very critical part in the overall culture KPI for the organization.